I've been driving long haul for 15 years, and I thought I'd seen everything the road could throw at me. Wrong exits, blown tires, aggressive drivers, all part of the job. But nothing prepared me for what happened on Highway 80 outside Reno last month. It was 2:47 a.m. when I saw her. A woman in a white dress, thumb out, standing under a flickering streetlight at a rest stop. Now, I have a strict policy about picking up hitchhikers. I don't. Insurance won't cover you if something goes wrong, and there are too many horror stories floating around truck stops. But something about her made me pull over. She was maybe 30, with long dark hair and this desperate look in her eyes. When she climbed into the cab, she was shivering despite the warm Nevada night. "Thank you," she whispered. "I need to get to Sacramento. My daughter's in the hospital." I told her I was headed that way anyway, and we pulled back onto the highway. For the first hour, she was quiet, just staring out the window. I kept glancing at her in the rearview mirror, and I swear she wasn't blinking, not once. I tried making conversation, asking about her daughter, how she'd ended up stranded. But every question seemed to make her withdraw further. She'd just nod or give me these one-word answers. Her skin was pale, almost translucent in the dashboard lights, and I noticed she didn't have any luggage. No purse, no phone, nothing. The strangest part was how she seemed to know the route better than I did. When I missed my usual exit, she quietly said, "Next one's faster anyway." How would she know that? Around 4 a.m. she started talking about her daughter Emma, who was 8 years old and had been in an accident, about how she'd been stranded at that rest stop for hours and no one would stop. Her voice was flat, monotone, like she was reading from a script. "What kind of accident?" I asked. She went quiet for a long time. Then, "A truck, like yours." The hair on my neck stood up. I adjusted my mirrors and noticed something that made my blood run cold. In the side mirror, I could see the passenger seat clearly. It was empty. I slammed on the brakes and pulled over, my heart hammering. The cab was silent except for the rumble of the engine. I looked at the passenger seat. Nothing. No indent in the cushion. No sign anyone had been there. "What's wrong?" Her voice came from directly behind my left ear. I spun around. She was standing in the sleeper berth, that same desperate look in her eyes. But now I could see through her to the back wall of the cab. "The accident," she said, stepping closer. "It was 3 years ago. Emma and I were walking home from the grocery store. The truck driver had been on the road for 20 hours straight. He fell asleep at the wheel. I fumbled for the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. He killed my little girl," she continued, "and he kept driving. Never stopped, never reported it, just kept driving." The temperature in the cab dropped 20 degrees. I could see my breath. I've been waiting at that rest stop every night since then, waiting for a truck like his, waiting for someone to pay. I managed to whisper, "I'm not him. I didn't hurt you." She smiled, and her teeth were black with dirt. "I know, but you stopped. You're the first one who stopped." The last thing I remember was her hand on my shoulder, cold as ice, and her voice saying, "Now you can help me find him." I woke up in the hospital 3 days later. They said another trucker found me unconscious in my cab, which had rolled down an embankment. The doctors couldn't explain why my body temperature had dropped so low, or why I kept talking about a woman named Emma in my sleep. But here's the thing that keeps me awake at night. When I got my personal effects back, there was a child's drawing in my shirt pocket, a crayon picture of a little girl holding her mother's hand. At the bottom, in purple crayon, it said, "Emma, age 8. I'd never seen that drawing before in my life, and I still have it. Sometimes, late at night, I swear I can hear a little girl laughing somewhere in my truck. The worst part? I started asking around at truck stops, showing people the drawing. 3 other drivers told me they'd seen the same woman at that rest stop. All of them had the same story. She appeared desperate, needed a ride to Sacramento, talked about her daughter Emma, but none of them had stopped. Until me. Now I drive different routes, avoid that stretch of highway altogether. But sometimes, in my peripheral vision, I catch glimpses of white fabric in the passenger seat, and I wonder if she's still looking for that driver, or if she's found something else entirely. Something that involves me helping her in ways I don't want to understand. 22 years on the road, and I thought I knew every trucker's voice on the CB radio between here and the Canadian border. Channel 19 was like a second home to me. Familiar handles, running jokes, warnings about speed traps. That's why what happened last winter still messes with my head. I was hauling a load of electronics from Minneapolis to Denver, running through Nebraska on Interstate 80, when the snow started coming down hard. Visibility was maybe 50 feet, and I was looking for a place to pull over when my CB crackled to life. Eastbound big truck approaching mile marker 126. You got your ears on. The voice was clear as day, but I didn't recognize the handle or the accent. Sounded like an older guy, maybe from the south. "Yeah, I got you, driver. This is Road Dog. What's your 20? "About 2 miles ahead of you, partner. Road's getting real slick up here. You might want to slow it down." I appreciated the heads up and told him so. That's when he said something that made me pause. "Name's Billy Hutchins. Been running this route for 37 years, and I ain't never seen snow like this in November." Here's the thing. I knew Billy Hutchins. Every trucker in the Midwest knew Billy. He was a legend, started driving in the 60s, knew every truck stop owner from Detroit to Denver. Problem was, Billy had died in a jackknife accident on this exact stretch of highway 5 years ago. I'd been to his funeral. "Billy," I said carefully, "what kind of rig you running?" "Oh, she's a beauty. 1987 Peterbilt, 379, blue and chrome. Got her twin stacks singing in the wind." My hand started shaking. That was Billy's truck, down to the last detail. The truck that had been crushed beyond recognition in the accident. "Billy, you feeling all right tonight?" Static for a moment then. "Right as rain, son. Just trying to keep you boys safe out here. This road's taken enough good drivers." I wanted to ask him about the accident, about what happened that night 5 years ago, but something in his tone stopped me. There was a sadness there, underneath the familiar drawl, like he was carrying a weight he couldn't put down. "You know this stretch pretty well, don't you?" I asked instead. "Better than most. Lost count of how many times I've run it. Used to make this trip twice a week back in the day. Know every curve, every grade, every place where the wind likes to grab your trailer." For the next 2 hours, Billy guided me through the worst blizzard I'd ever driven in. He called out every curve, every overpass, every patch of black ice. His voice was steady, calm, like he was sitting right next to me instead of somewhere out there in the storm. The strange part was how he seemed to know exactly where I was. Even though I never told him my mile markers, he'd warn me about black ice 30 seconds before I hit it, tell me about wind gusts right before they rocked my trailer. It was like he had eyes on me somehow. "Road dog, you got a family back home?" he asked around midnight. "Yeah, Billy. Wife and 2 kids in Omaha." "Good. You make sure you get back to them. Road's got a way of keeping drivers who ain't careful." There was something in his voice when he said that. A loneliness that made my chest tight. Like he was speaking from experience he wouldn't wish on anyone. "Billy, you ever think about hanging up the keys? Spending time with your own family?" Long pause. "Oh, son, my running days are over. Have been for a while now. But the road don't let you go that easy." As the snow started to let up, I realized I hadn't seen another truck in hours. Not one set of taillights ahead of me. No headlights in my mirrors. "Billy, where exactly are you? I haven't seen another truck all night." Long pause. Then, "Oh son, I'm right where I always am. Mile marker 127. My blood went cold. Mile marker 127 was exactly where Billy had died, where his truck had skidded off the road and rolled down the embankment. "Billy, listen to me. You need to..." "I know what I need to do," he interrupted. "Same thing I do every night when the weather gets bad. Keep you boys safe. Keep the road from taking anyone else." The CB went quiet. I drove in silence for another hour until I reached the truck stop in Grand Island. When I got out to fuel up, I walked around to check my trailer. There, in the snow that had accumulated on my mud flaps, were tire tracks. Big rig tracks running parallel to mine. But here's what really got me. I checked the CB radio logs on my dashboard unit, the ones that record all transmissions. According to the log, I'd been talking to myself for 3 hours straight. No incoming transmissions. Nothing. The next morning, I called Billy's widow, Martha, told her what happened, expecting her to think I was crazy. Instead, she was quiet for a long time. "You're the 7th driver who's called me with that exact story," she said finally. "Always the same stretch of road, always during bad weather. Billy's still out there, trying to keep you boys safe." She told me about the accident, how Billy had been driving in conditions just like what I had experienced. Another truck had jackknifed ahead of him, and Billy swerved to avoid it. His truck went off the road and rolled down the embankment. They found him the next morning, still in his cab, CB microphone in his hand. He was trying to warn other drivers about the accident when he died, Martha said. That's just who Billy was, always looking out for everyone else. Now, whenever I'm running I-80 and the weather turns bad, I keep my CB on channel 19. And sometimes, when the wind is howling and the snow is flying, I hear that familiar voice. "Eastbound big truck, you got your ears on?" And I always answer, "Yeah, Billy, I got you." Because some drivers never really leave the road. They just find a different way to keep on trucking. Some lows you remember forever, not because of where they went, but because of where they came from. I've been running specialized freight for 8 years. Medical equipment, laboratory supplies, stuff that can't wait for regular shipping. The call came in on a Tuesday. Emergency delivery from a research facility outside Portland to a hospital in Seattle. Simple run, good money, no questions asked. The facility was way out in the woods, down a gravel road that my GPS couldn't find. I had to follow handwritten directions, turning at unmarked intersections until I found it. A collection of low concrete buildings surrounded by a chain link fence. No signs, no company logo, just a number painted on the gate. The guard who let me in was nervous, kept checking his watch and scanning the tree line. "You're late," he said, though I was actually 15 minutes early. "Traffic was lighter than expected," I replied. He didn't smile. "Back up to loading dock 3. They're waiting for you." The loading dock was in a separate building, down a corridor that smelled like bleach and something else, something sweet and rotten. The guys who brought out my cargo were wearing full hazmat suits, which wasn't unusual for medical transport. What was unusual was how they moved, like they were terrified of dropping whatever was in those sealed containers. "Refrigerated transport," the lead guy told me, his voice muffled by the mask. "Temperature can't go above 38 degrees. And whatever you do, don't open the cargo area until you reach Seattle." I'd hauled organs before, tissue samples, vaccines, all standard stuff. But something about this felt different. The containers were unmarked, military grade, and they were heavier than they should have been. When I lifted one, I could swear I felt something shift inside. What really bothered me was the paperwork. Usually, medical shipments come with detailed manifests, tracking numbers, chain of custody forms. This delivery had none of that. Just a single sheet with my name, the destination, and a phone number I'd never seen before. "What exactly am I hauling?" I asked the lead guy. He paused, like he wasn't sure he should answer. "Biological samples, research materials. That's all you need to know." The drive started normal enough. I-5 North, cruise control set at 65, reefer unit humming to keep the cargo cold. But about an hour in, things got weird. First, it was the radio. Every station was playing the same song. Some classical piece I didn't recognize, but it made my skin crawl. When I tried to change it, the display just showed static. Then I started hearing things from the cargo area. Tapping, like someone knocking on the inside of the containers. I pulled over at a rest stop and walked around the trailer. Nothing unusual on the outside, and the reefer unit was working perfectly. Temperature holding steady at 37 degrees. But when I put my ear to the trailer wall, I heard it clearly. A rhythmic tapping, like Morse code. And underneath that, something that sounded like breathing. I called the number they'd given me, but it went straight to a disconnected message. Tried calling the hospital in Seattle, but they'd never heard of the delivery. No record of any emergency transport. No department waiting for medical supplies. That's when I started getting really scared. I'd been driving for 8 years, hauled everything from live animals to radioactive materials, but I'd never had a delivery that didn't exist on the receiving end. I pulled into a truck stop outside Centralia and called my dispatcher. "Hey Mike, I need you to double check this Seattle delivery. Hospital says they're not expecting anything." "What Seattle delivery?" he asked. "You're supposed to be in Sacramento with a load of furniture." My blood went cold. "Mike, I'm sitting in Washington with a trailer full of medical supplies. You called me Tuesday morning, said it was an emergency run." "David, I haven't talked to you since Monday. Are you feeling all right?" I hung up and checked my logbook. According to my records, I was supposed to be in California, not Washington. But I was definitely in Washington, with a trailer full of something that was starting to smell. By the time I hit Olympia, I was hearing voices, muffled, like they were coming from inside the containers. At first, I thought it was just road noise, wind through the trailer gaps. But as I got closer to Seattle, the voices got clearer. They were calling my name. "David," they whispered. "David, let us out." I'd never told anyone at the facility my name. It wasn't on the shipping manifest, not on my truck. Nowhere they could have seen it. But somehow, they knew. I parked at a 24-hour truck stop and climbed into the sleeper berth. But I couldn't sleep. Every few minutes, I'd hear the tapping again, and then my name, over and over. The temperature gauge on the reefer unit was acting up too. It would read 37 degrees, then suddenly jump to 85, then back down again. But I could feel heat radiating from the trailer walls, like there was a fire inside. Around 3 a.m., I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed the spare key and walked to the back of the trailer. My hands were shaking as I unlocked the cargo doors. The containers were exactly where I'd left them, but now they were warm to the touch, despite the refrigeration unit running full blast. And there was condensation on the inside of the trailer walls, like someone had been breathing in there. I opened the first container. It was full of ice, melting ice, and nothing else. The second container, same thing. All 12 containers, just ice and water. But here's what made me quit trucking that night. At the bottom of each container, pressed into the melting ice, were human handprints. Perfect impressions, like someone had been trying to claw their way out. I left the trailer at the truck stop and drove my cab straight to the nearest police station. Told them everything. Showed them the delivery papers, the GPS route, everything. They drove out to the facility the next day. There was nothing there. No buildings, no fence, no loading dock. Just empty forest and a foundation that looked like it had been abandoned for decades. The officer who took my statement said something I'll never forget. "Son, there hasn't been a research facility out there since 1987. Place burned down in a fire. Killed 12 people." I asked him what kind of research they were doing there. He looked uncomfortable, shuffled through some old files. According to these reports, they were working on preservation techniques, trying to find ways to keep human tissue viable for longer periods. Something about suspended animation research. The number of victims matched the number of containers in my trailer. 12 people, 12 containers, 12 sets of handprints pressed into melting ice. I never found out what I was really carrying that night, but sometimes, late at night, I still hear my name being called from empty spaces, and I always check the temperature, even though I don't drive anymore. Some deliveries you never really finish, and some cargo never stops trying to reach its destination, no matter how long it takes.